designer or as somebody that's building skills or actions on our platform today, and just getting into some of the underlying technology and process behind the smart prototyping feature that we've rolled out on our platform. This one was rolled out in January, but is part of a much larger effort that we're putting into making our prototyping tool a much more powerful tool for designers and teams that are using our platform, and really turning that prototype into an artifact that can live a lot further in the process between design and development. If you've been, if you're an existing user of Voiceflow and you've used our test tool, it was fairly rudimentary for a long time, and so it didn't really help bridge that gap between design and development very well. And so between the smart prototyping and a lot of the work that we're doing, introducing visuals into the test tool, and multimodality interactions, things like that, we're trying to make that prototype that you can create on Voiceflow get closer and closer to that end user experience that you're building, whether that's an Alexa skill, a Google action, or a custom assistant, an IVR system, mobile in-app assistant, anything, any sort of conversational application you're building. We want your prototype the prototype that you're building on Voiceflow to get closer and closer to that end product, because there's 4 major use cases in the workflow of our users and teams that we see where the prototype is a hugely valuable asset, or it could be, if as we continue to put better tools in your hands to use. The first one is just internal testing while you're building. I know for myself, I as soon as I create a block on the canvas, I want to see how that works. I want to test it myself. I want to interact with it. Conversation design is it's a tough business, or it's a tough job to do, because you don't really know how it's going to work until you can hear it, until you can interact with it, until you can speak with it, until you can see it and touch it. And so just creating faster feedback loops for the designers and the builders that are using our tool. That's really the first use case that we're trying to solve for by bettering our prototyping tool. The second is for user testing. A lot of people, a lot of teams, they want to get feedback on the things that they're building. They want to see how they function in the hands of users. And so the prototype tool does need to reflect more and more that end user experience for you to really get valuable feedback from that user testing. If as was previously, if it didn't handle any reasonable utterance, well, your test would break. So it's hard to get feedback on the experience you're designing versus the platform in which you were testing with on Voiceflow's old test tool. So we want to fill that gap so that you can do more user testing, more customer testing, get feedback from testing beyond just yourself, so that you can improve your designs, improve your conversational experiences that you're building. Third use case is for demoing for people. I know if you're working on any form of team, if you're working where you're building for a client, you just want to show your partner at home. You want to have a nice demo that kind of hides away all of the complexity of the skill, and again, just is reflective of that end experience. So we want a tool that's going to act and behave as your end product experience is going to, so that it's a true demo. It really shows off what you're designing. It communicates your ideas. It communicates the functional flows that you've built, and works as a really strong communication tool. And finally, if you're not just kind of building this project from end to end yourself, and you're working with development teams, developers, and you do need to hand off the project at some point, then better prototype works as a better communication tool for the design and the user experience that you've created, and even a lot of the functional technical aspects of what you've designed into your project. And so again, the prototype tool can act as a better artifact to hand off to development. It leaves less open for interpretation, leaves less room for ambiguity between, you know, what you intended to create and you know, what a developer might pick up and interpret on their end. And so yeah, that's really, you know, the pain points that we've heard over the last year just with the prototyping experience in people's workflow. Those are kind of the 4 big pain points that we wanted to solve for. And step 1 in doing that was getting smart prototyping into our platform. So I'll just walk through the process of kind of building out a very basic project flow here to get a sense of how prototyping works. The smart prototyping works on Voiceflow. Let me just share my screen. Can you confirm that you can see my screen, please?
Yep, I can see it.
All right, so for today's webinar, we're going to build out a burger ordering flow here. Now, the whole smart prototyping aspect, its foundation is your interaction model. So every time that you create an intent in your project, that is the data that is going to be training your model. So for this project, we've got a welcome to Voiceflow Burger. What would you like to order? And then there's a prompt. And so it's just listening. This project is now listening for an intent. I'm going to create a place order intent. Oh. Place order. And so what might people say to trigger this? That's when you're dropping in your utterances here. I'd like to make an order. Can I make an order? I'd like a cheeseburger. I'd like a hamburger. All right. So we've got a very, quick set of utterances here that people might say to invoke this. Now, just kind of first, and before we get into the way that things work now, let's just kind of review the way that things used to work in Voiceflow and why they work that way. So previously, if you created your intent and you defined your utterances here, better just remember what one of these are. So when you open the test tool, you can still see the previous functionality. And so what we had in place, what runs the test tool without any training is basically an NLC, so a natural language comprehension. It will understand that a word has been said, but it's not intelligent like an natural language processing or natural language understanding engine insofar that it cannot determine the intent or the content of what was said. It's purely, it's smart enough to capture, this is a word that was said. And so the way that this works is in our system is if I say,
hamburger, what would you like to order?
I'd like a hamburger, please.
What is your order?
Oh, you know what? I have this trained already. Get me out of here. So the way that this works is it is just looking for the exact like regex or the exact verbatim text that you've inputted in the utterance here. So it would need to read exactly what you've inputted as the utterance in order to match that intent. So same thing with when you start to use slots in your intent. It is just filling that gap. So if I were to include a slot in this model and say have like a sandwich slot here, of which I have the values like hamburger and cheeseburger. If I say I'd like a hamburger, our old test tool would have recognized that and it would have filled the slot with hamburger. But if I said I'd like a dump truck, it would have just captured like, okay, so it matched the first part of this utterance and then there was some value here. So my sandwich would get set to dump truck. It's a very dumb system. But what it did, is it allowed for quick testing, or it allowed for testing your designs in some way, but it was really just testing your logic models and was only good for the designer themselves or the person creating the project, because you had to know exactly what to say at every step. You had to know what slot values that were valid in your project and what weren't. And it didn't allow for any leeway to interact with your project outside of those very specific boundaries. So instead, now in introducing smart prototyping, what we've done is we've built an NLP directly into our test tool. So if you go in here on any project type now, so it was previously just available for General Assistant project types, but now it's available for Alexa and Google project types also. If you go in, you'll see the training modal here on the top right. This will give you a status of your project's training. Now, each individual project has its own model created on the NLP that runs behind this. And so each project has its own separate model. So I am going to be training this Voiceflow burger project to that model. And it will run just for this project that I've created. And so when I hit train assistant, what this is doing is it's taking the data I've defined in my interaction model and uploading that to our NLP, which is, so the NLP that we're using behind the scenes is Lewis, which is Microsoft Azure's NLP system. And so this is training that data to the model. Now, when I run a test, the way that this is going to work is,
welcome to VF Burger. What would you like to order?
I'd really like a cheeseburger. Okay. So the way that this works is that was confirmed. I guess let me just drop a speak step in here so that we can hear when it is confirmed. Sure thing, I've got your order. And then I'll do another prompt just so we can loop through these. All right, here, let me just run that test again so you can hear.
Welcome to VF Burger. What would you like to order?
I'd really like a cheeseburger.
Sure thing.
Okay.
I've got your order.
So now, now when I run these tests, as opposed to just doing a regex match on, on the utterances that I'm using in the test tool, it's actually passing this to Lewis. Lewis is resolving this and going, oh, okay. Based off of this utterance, I believe with some degree of confidence that this is the intent that the user is asking for. And so is the confidence based on edit distance, or does it do stemming or some parsing? I don't know the answer to that, Jill. I will. I'll need to follow up with you on that and ask our engineering team how that specifically is handled here, or how it's specifically handled by Lewis. And so, yes. So what you can see is if you turn on debug mode, we're actually showing you the confidence interval for the intent matching that took place on Lewis. So it's just, all we're really doing is just passing through the data back from Lewis and resolving which path we go forward in the project based off of the intent matched. And so this works for intents. So you can see on any intents that I create in this project, it's going to train against these utterances. And so I think best practice for training your intents is you're going to want about 5 to 10 utterances in there. And it really depends on what your user experience is. So this is a burger ordering flow, which could be, it's a fairly constrained collection of utterances that users might use to communicate their desire to order a hamburger. Because if you're at a drive-through or you're standing at the cash register, the context is already narrowed down to like, I'm going to purchase something off this menu. But if you have scenarios that are much broader, for example, if you're designing a customer support agent where a user could be asking for any degree of context for which they need support, or the intents would match any degree of context from like I'd like to upgrade to I need technical support to I need like account support, then the variety of utterances that you're going to have, that you're going to want to provide, is much larger. So functionally speaking, for the training, provide a minimum of 5 to 10, but depending on how broadly your users could interact with with an intent or attempt to invoke an intent, you're going to want to provide more variety. But ultimately, this is getting trained through, and then you are able to when you're running your tests, this is the core data set that it is going to build its model against, that is going to inform the data set that's used to validate an intent in the actual test. So that is how intents and utterances are handled here. And yeah, just kind of jumping back in here. So you can see when you run the test, turn on the debug mode, and you can see,
what would you like to order?
Sorry, you can see kind of confidence intervals as you're testing. So if I say, I want some food.
What is your order?
Okay, so that didn't match. That was closer to the fallback intent, matching the fallback intent that's built into every project. I'll get into the fallback intent in 1 second, but let's try another one. I'm hungry and I need to make an order. Okay, so that's 70% confidence. I'd like to order a hamburger. 85%. So you can use these confidence intervals that are surfaced here to help refine the list of utterances that you actually provide on your intents. So if you want to, the way that I generally structure my workflow when I'm building out a project is that I will start with my basic set of 5 to 10 utterances in here, run through some tests, try to approach my tests as I can envision different users interacting with this. And based on the confidence score, if something's at like a 75% or less confidence score, an utterance is at a 75% or less confidence score, I'm going to copy and paste that utterance back into my list of utterances defined on the intent here. And so you can use this kind of iterative approach of being, jumping between defining your intents on your models or the utterances on your intents, jumping into testing out some more intents, seeing that confidence score is high, and anytime that it's low, then it's going to take that data, put it back into your interaction model so that it strengthens it to handle a broader set of potential interactions. I guess that the questions coming through chat here did anyone have any specific questions about the training of intents? I'll get into the slot values next here. I'm not sure I can see. Where is the chat? There's the chat. All right, thanks for joining. And the fallback intent. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'll touch on the fallback intent first. So you saw that. So every project in Voiceflow has a general fallback intent built into it, so that you can utilize that within your project. So this is if you're on an Alexa project, if you use the Alexa fallback intent, the built-in intent, that will utilize that. If you're on a Google or General Assistant project, you can use the it's called the NonIntent here. And the reason that it's called NonIntent is because that's how it's handled on Lewis, or its nomenclature in Lewis. So you're able to actually effectively use that to create a functional path where, you know, a fallback interaction is required. So in our case, it's one moment. I'll get somebody to help you with your order. Cool. So this is my, this is my order flow here, and then this is my fallback. And so you're able to create this. And again, when you're looking at the confidence intervals on your tests, you can see where something is triggering a non-intent, and really that's when you want to go. You know, if that should be within the domain of your intent, make sure that you're training for that. So I'll just run through an example of how that gets handled. So,
welcome to VS Burger. What would you like to order?
I need food. Okay, so I need food hits the non-intent. So what I'm going to do, as I said, okay, I'm going to go into my place order and say I need food. Pop back into my test. Train it. So this is just updating my model on Lewis now to handle that new utterance, and then generate more new utterances based off that. And so,
welcome to VS Burger. What would you like to order?
I'm needing some food. Okay, so now it's,
sure thing.
Yeah, that was a variant on what I put in there, but now that's scoped into my place order intent. So hopefully seeing this confidence interval, being able to see that data and that confidence interval allows you to, again, just kind of iterate back and forth between the design of your intents into testing and back again. What this is doing is it's really just strengthening the fidelity of your prototype. You know, if you want to use this prototype for testing or demoing, and you want it to be flexible enough to handle whatever your customer or your teammate or user or stakeholder is going to throw at it, then you want to spend a little bit of time just refining the training of your model here. Now, Jill, I'm gonna throw your question to my teammate while we're on here to see if I can get an answer for you while we're in this call. Confidence. See if we can get a real-time answer here for that. Okay, so that's utterances. And now how do we handle slots? Max, you're doing a great job creating the segues for me here. Thank you. So we've got a place order intent here. It's just a top level intent. So now we do want to be able to capture slot values within this. So people aren't going to jump up. People aren't going to show up to your cash register or your drive-through and say, you know, I need to make an order. They're going to show up and say like, hey, give me a cheeseburger and some fries and a Coke. And so I want to be able to handle that too. So I want a sandwich with some side fries, salad, poutine because we live in Canada, onion rings, and a drink. And again, using custom slot values. So Coke, root beer, what, Sprite? I'm not sure what else. What else is good? Iced tea. One more. There we go. Iced tea. Okay. So now I've got my slot values built in there. So I'm not sure, just to run through, take a step back and running through slots. So for anybody on the call who's not necessarily familiar with slots can be maybe interchangeable with the idea of entities. And so the idea here is like, this is an interchangeable piece of information that would be utilized within an utterance. So within the statement of I want to blank with some blank and a blank, there's going to be this interchangeable piece of data that I'm going to provide. And I want to be able to scope in what values are valid for that and which are not. And so for the sandwich value, for example, I want to be able to define what potential slot values we're going to capture from this are. So this is, because this is a restaurant or a fast food restaurant, we've got hamburger, cheeseburger, chicken, sandwich, and fish sandwich. Try to use not use any trademarked names here. And so often those things can be said in different ways, and you want to be able to capture all of those synonyms. So there's the ability to put what are they called? The Impossible Burger, or the Robert? What are they? What's the brand name? Okay, we'll go with vegan burger, but we can throw in a trademark name here if you give it to me. So the idea here is with synonyms, you can capture all of the variable ways that somebody might communicate this specific value. So, you know, for a hamburger, it might just be burger or a burg, or I'm not sure if there are any other ways. Cheeser, the big chicken, yeah. Big Mac, etc. And so what this is doing is this slot value, if it recognizes any of these slot synonyms, it's going to resolve the slot value to hamburger. So it goes, oh, they want a hamburger. Now, slot values that are captured on an utterance, those get mapped to a variable in your project, so you can use this data again. So let's just do use this example here and say I'd like a sandwich. I need a sandwich. All right. So I've got a couple examples of utterances where we capture this value. If I'm using in the test tool, I'm just going to train my project again here. So as you can see, we're trying to make it obvious for you when you need to train, or when your project has enough deviance from the last trained interaction model, so that you can kind of train it and keep it up to date, and make sure that your tests are reflective of your interaction model at its current state. You don't have to train it every time you test it, but it's just best practice to do so. So let this get trained here. Great. So now if I do my,
Welcome to VF Burger. What would you like to order?
I'd like a cheeseburger.
Sure thing.
Okay.
I've got your order.
So it's recognizing this. It's recognizing this this intent, and is recognizing my slot value. If on your intent, you need to capture a slot value. So in this intent, what I want to do is I need to capture that sandwich value before I move on from that intent, or else I can't resolve that. That's when dialogue management comes into play. And so the way that is set up for those that are not, again, for those who just haven't played around with this yet, is on the intent step on your canvas, you have the ability to set a slot value as required. So for this example, I'm going to say that we can't move on. We can't move on from this intent. We can't confirm that we've matched this intent until we've captured the sandwich slot value. So what sandwich would you like? So if this intent is triggered, but there's no sandwich slot value passed with it, the system is going to follow up and say, okay, well, what sandwich do you want here? I'm going to make that, and then you can also, so you need to define, all right, well then to this question, what would somebody respond? So they'd, by default, we assume they'd say cheeseburger, but you could also, add on like, I'd like a sandwich, give me a sandwich, please. So again, you want to use about five utterances. Anytime you're asked for utterances, use about 5 to 10, just to make sure that your model's fairly strong. So now I can't move on past this intent until I've provided that sandwich slot value. So again, I'm going to pop back in here, train it. That's going to train that dialogue management aspect that I just added in here. Jill, in terms of the how close Lewis is to Alexa and Google, I'd say this is purely a qualitative guess on this, but you're probably 95% parity in terms of accuracy. Like generally, all of your all of the utterances that you're training are going to be recognized the same. It's when you kind of get into slot values and there's a lot of like domain specific slot types that you'd be using where you're going to start to see more variance in performance there. But generally, to support the types of interactions that you're doing at the intent level, capturing utterances, you're going to have, I haven't noticed any noticeable performance difference. To answer that question. So jumping back in here, so I've trained it. Dialogue management is set. I need to capture, certainly on the testing systematically. So I'm going to run my test here now, and
welcome to VF Burger. One moment. I'll get somebody to help you with your order.
Jump the gun on pressing spacebar there. So now I'm going to say, I'd like a sandwich, please. So it.
Sure thing. I've got your order.
So it captured. Okay, here. That just captured sandwich as my slot value. So let me try that again.
Welcome to VF Burger. What would you like to order?
I'd like to make an order.
What sandwich would you
like? So there it triggered, it recognized that this was my intent. My intent was the place order, but I did not pass through any sort of recognizable slot value there. So then it is, it's following up with me fulfilling the dialogue management to get that slot value before it confirms the intent. So say hamburger.
Sure thing. I've got your order.
Cool. So now you can see that my intent was matched once that slot value was provided. So so in terms of the slot values that you're providing, there's a couple things to consider. And so the first is if you want like a very generalized slot value, name being an example. So if you want to capture a first name, the more values that you provide that slot value to train against, the better, because the scope of recognition just grows exponentially with the more data you provide. In a test I did for recognition of German cities, if I provided 10 German cities as slot values and then train my project against that, it had a recognition of generally the top 100 German cities, and then I provided a list of the top 100 cities as slot values, and I wasn't able to find a German city that it didn't recognize. So the more data, the better if you want broad matching. Now, in a scenario like this, that's not actually what I want, because the slot values that I want my NLP to recognize while testing are actually pretty narrow. So on my place order, or on my sandwich slot, for example, I've got 9 items here, and I really don't want it to go beyond that. You saw in my previous test, it is actually trained to include slot values that are beyond the scope of this. I said sandwich, and it recognized sandwich as being the NLP was trained that sandwich is related to these slot values. So something that you need to do if you do want to scope the appropriate slot values back to a finite set of slots is use conditions following the intent. So it's a bit of a workaround, but I can just kind of get into how that works. So slot values are functionally the same as a variable in Voiceflow. Every slot value that is captured is usable as a variable within your content. So you could do something as simple of you could use it in a speak block for a sandwich. So when I test this and I pass through my sandwich information, it'll use the slot value I provided within the speak step.
Welcome to VF Burger. What would you like to order?
Give me a cheeseburger.
Sure thing. I've got your order for a cheeseburger.
So it's saving my slot value to this sandwich variable. And so I can use that. Now, what I was talking about is like in this scenario where I want to capture that slot value, and it's going to capture cheeseburger, but it's also going to capture sandwich. Then I'm going to have to use like an if condition in my project to be able to say, if the value equals one of the slots defined, take path A. If it does not match that, then take path B. That's the best way to limit the scope of your slots to just a certain set of values. Because right now, everything you provide in your interaction model gets trained to that model. And so the recognizable data set for it is going to go beyond just the words you provide. And yeah, for the anonymous attendee, yes, once a slot value is filled, it persists in your project until it is rewritten there. So you can use cheeseburger. Cheeseburger will be that variable value, that sandwich value, until it's overwritten, or you use a set step to like reset it to blank. And then slot values, they're able to persist session over session. So if, for example, you have like an introduce myself intent, and somebody provides their name as part of that, you can persist that name session over session. So you could say, hey, welcome back, Rob, the next time. Awesome. So that is how you add slots, use the slots, customize them. Again, you're going to want to go through that iterative testing process just to see, what values are captured. Rob, to answer your question, you do need to specify each slot value in the if statement. It's clunky, I know. Something we're working on. I can assure you of that. But for now, that's the best way. In the if statement, if you just want to narrow acceptable sandwich slot values down, you'd have to use kind of a nested if condition. That's if sandwich equals cheeseburger, or if sandwich equals hamburger, or follow this path, else follow the other path. All right. So I've covered off the refining the model. The last thing to cover off here, I'm going to leave time for Q&A. I think I've been getting most of these answers in as I go, but so something that just recently came available, recently as in Monday, is the ability to export your interaction model from your project. So this is on pro plans and up, or available for pro plans and up. But we know that for a lot of our users, they're building in, or they're designing in Voiceflow, they're building a prototype in Voiceflow, but they might be doing custom development for their skill. They want to be able to pass off data into the NLP that teammates are using, so that they can start training. So we don't necessarily want the model that you've spent time refining in here to be locked in your Voiceflow project. And so that's why we're enabling this, the ability to export this. So you can export for Alexa, Dialogflow ES, or Microsoft Luis. And I'll just give you an example of how this gets utilized. So this is directly consumable within any of the developer environments that those three platforms have. So it's just the JSON export, or the file being exported, is formatted specifically for each of those platforms. So it's purely an upload that you need to do to consume it. So I'll give you an example on Lewis. If I want to import this project, I'm going to use this upload the model here, and we'll call it burger order. And so if you really want to get into the weeds on refining your model for its use in Voiceflow's prototype, you can actually just set up a Lewis instance for yourself and import these models, and you get a lot more of the behind the scenes of how it's working. So if I were to train this, once I train this and I test it within the Lewis console here, that's going to perform. It's going to be the exact same performance as you get in the Voiceflow test tool. And so, for example, here it shows you the training data that has been created for, behind the scenes with your Lewis model. It's going to be the exact same thing that you're going to see here. The same training processes run on it. So all this is doing is it's taking various combinations of your slots and your utterances and filling those in to create different utterance values to train against. And in terms of your slot values, for example, here's all of the values that I've uploaded. They have a function to no, it doesn't work on this one because it's pretty narrow, but if I had a color slot, for example, it would be able to provide suggestions on additional values to add. So it's a good way to get kind of more data behind the scenes, under the hood, to test to build into your model. But yeah, again, this is just going to show you, I like a cheeseburger here. So it shows you exactly what you're saying. If I were to say, I'd like a cheeseburger in here in the Voiceflow test tool, it's going to give me an 89% confidence interval. And it's going to, we would have matched the cheeseburger slot, for example. So again, the whole point of this is just to give you a bit more portability of your data. So if you do need to hand off this data to team members, if you want to use it to build your skill off platform, you have the ability to kind of refine the model a bit on Voiceflow and then take it with you. Awesome. And then the last thing to call out, I'm not sure if everyone on this call was part of the V2 event or has seen some of the wonderful content that our growth team has put out during the event and since the event. That's just kind of covering off some of the big announcements. But one of the major announcements was the Voiceflow SDK, which allows you to customize your projects in development. So one of the specific functions there that relates back to the prototyping is that you're actually able to swap in and out different NLPs and then have that pass back into our test tool. So if, for example, as part of your workflow, you didn't want to have Luis and you wanted to use Lex or Raza or Dialogflow as the NLP NLU running on your project, with our SDK, you are able to swap out the NLP that is being used to resolve your intents in the tests. So there is a sign up form for SDK access right now. We're slowly rolling that out. But if you do want to get into the code and further customize the smart prototyping on Voiceflow to actually be, using your specific NLP, then that is something that's available. And yeah, just two other relevant things I can kind of provide some context that are coming on our roadmap. The one is the customization of built-in intents. So for example, the NonIntent that we used in this project, this is a bit of a closed box for you as a user. You don't know what values we've scoped into that. And realistically, depending on the project, you're going to want to define what is out of scope for that project yourself. And so the way to do that is allowing you to add custom utterances to these built-in intents. So that's something that we're going to allow for. On Alexa, those custom utterances are actually going to upload to the ADC with you for the intents where you are able to customize those. So it's a little bit of a dual purpose function. And then more in the medium term, something that we're going to be working on is allowing you to get your training, get the training data from each test session that you run. So getting reporting on the sessions, what intents were hit, what utterances were used, what confidence intervals those utterances were met with, so that you're able to get this data back from sessions that are run not just by yourself, but if you're doing customer testing, if you're asking friends to test out this, you can not only get qualitative feedback, but we want you to be able to get quantitative feedback from the prototype tool. So that's something that we will be working on in the coming quarter that will hopefully continue to make this a more valuable function for you. All right, that's what I wanted to cover off and then some today. Are there any questions, topics I didn't get into? Any open questions here? I've got the chat, the Q&A. All right, let's see the Q&A. What's the slot? Got that one. How do we handle any out of context? So there's two ways to handle out of context. I guess it depends on what specifically you're looking for. So On a on your prompt step or your choice step, if you're trying to handle utterances that are out of context for the intents that you've defined, there's a couple ways to do that. The first is to try and like repair that. So if it's that might be something that's relevant, you're going to want to use your reprompts on your choice or your prompt steps, so that you're able to like ask a follow-up question. So if it didn't match an intent, reprompt to try to get them to say something that does match. Then the second one, can you give an example of that condition? Like, is that like if cheeseburger, then what kind of cheese? So this would be just on the utterance itself. So if I said, I'm really hungry, and that doesn't match, my, place order intents or any of the intents I've defined on this project, then you can ask a reprompt that's going to basically prompt the user to say it again in a different way to try and say something that's going to match these intents. The second way that you handle out of context is with the non-intent, where this is something that you can build into your project to create a response or a path in your project to take a user down if they are not matching any of those intents. So generally, I like to include reprompts to try and just prompt an intent match from that user, and then if that fails once, twice, or 3 times, then put them down that non-intent or that fallback path. Can you give an example of the condition? Alex, I'm not sure the context of that question. Do you mind just did you mean using the condition step here to scope my slot values? Yeah, okay, cool. So in this, the context I was using this was, I only want to capture the following 7 slot values for sandwich, and because in my test it's going to be trained to learn from those 7, and it might capture 10 different things, 15 different values there. I'm going to want to say if sandwich equals hamburger, then add in every valid slot value there, then take this path, and if it doesn't, then take a different path. So what that allows me to do is, I can say, so if in this scenario, if they provided a valid slot value, I'd say, great, I've got your order confirmed. And in this path, I would say something like, available sandwich options are cheeseburger, hamburger, fish, okay, now what can I get you? So it's a bit of a repair path for that slot value to get a very specific slot. All right, and then from Robert, are you able to provide information when we can deploy? So deploying the VF project to a Lexbot, that is that is available. That is accomplishable with the SDK. So you'd be able to basically be able to design the dialogue manager in Voiceflow, and then use our runtime to use our runtime built into a Lexbot. So, depending on what interface you want to use and the NLP, you can customize that on the general runtime. So it's basically just pushing the dialogue management handled by Voiceflow through your application. But we can share around after this the sign up for the SDK. we'll be releasing all of the documentation for that, so you can get a better understanding of how that type of thing might be completed. Awesome. And then from Brian, going back to slots, I recently had the experience of two intents with identical utterances, except for a different slot, but they wouldn't resolve correctly. For example, intent 1 had the utterance, tell me about slot 1, and intent 2 had, tell me about slot 2. But no matter what I did, any utterance I put into resolve to intent 1, I couldn't get into intent 2 to work. Yes, I believe that's a particular, this particular scenario is a bug on the resolution of these right now, Brian. So we're actually pushing a fix for that scenario, where you've got that basically overlap happening. So just on that note, yes, this is still very much a work in progress. We're finding edge cases where behavior is not as expected. So as you do use this, and if you're running into issues, please hit the intercom button. Let us know what the issue is so that we can strengthen this whole thing. Great question, Stephen Stefan. I'm not sure the pronunciation there. Thank you. I should have gone into that. The model for your project is trained based off of the language or locale that is used when you set up your project. So when you create a project, regardless of the channel here, it's going to ask you for a language, and then this will be the language in which your model is trained. So it works across all supported languages. Just make sure that you're setting, if you do want to have the model trained in Spanish, you're setting your project in Spanish out of the gates. If you've got multiple locales on a project, for example, on an Alexa project where you'd have the ability to select multiple locales, it will train for the first listed locale. Great. Any other last second questions here? If not, I'm running over time. I appreciate everybody making the time to talk through it or walk through this stuff with me. This is great. This is the first time I've really had a chance to go in depth on this particular feature. I'm personally just wasting a lot of time in this because it's fascinating to see how specific training best practices work within our tool. And so not wasting, but like investing a lot of time. So, if you do come across any best practices or things that work well, message me, rob@voiceflow.com. I'm happy to talk more about this. If you've got specific questions, I'm happy to email or hop on a call. Yeah, appreciate everyone's interest in this.
Thanks so much, everyone. And we'll be making this recording available afterwards. And thanks again, Rob, for taking the time to walk us through.
Love it.
All right,
Very
see you
happy
guys
to.
next time.
All right, take care.